Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a story you probably think you know inside and out. I mean, it's one of the most famous narratives in human history, right? The story of baby Moses and the bulrushes leading into his adulthood. But when we actually strip away the centuries of Sunday school adaptations and cinematic retellings, the original text of Exodus chapter 2 reveals a much more calculated, strategic, and honestly, morally complex reality than the sanitized pop culture version we all grew up with. Okay, let's dive into this.
So, the pop culture myth paints this heartbreaking picture of desperate abandonment. You know the one. A grieving mother puts her baby in a basket, lets the unpredictable currents of the Nile just take him away, and leaves his fate entirely to chance. But the textual reality? It tells a completely different story. It wasn't abandonment at all. It was a highly strategic, incredibly risky placement right there in the reeds. And it was designed specifically so the child would be found by royalty. Let's break down exactly how this went down.
Part 1. A calculated rescue plan. We really need to talk about the brilliant, active agency of Moses' mother, who was a woman from the house of Levi. See, she doesn't just panic, she follows strict steps outlined right there in the text. Step 1, she hides the child for 3 full months. Step 2, when she literally can't hide him from the Egyptians anymore, she doesn't just grab any old basket. She actually engineers a waterproof ark made of bulrushes sealed tightly with slime and pitch. Step 3, and this is absolutely vital, she places the ark strictly in the flags, or the reeds by the river's brink. He is not floating away, he's anchored. And finally, step 4, she stations the baby's sister afar off to watch and wait. She isn't leaving anything to chance here, she is executing a desperate, brilliantly calculated heist to save her son's life.
Let's move to part 2, the royal adoption strategy, and see how this builds.
Because placing the basket was really only half the battle, right? The location was incredibly specific. Moses' mother placed it exactly where the Pharaoh's daughter was known to come down and wash herself. Plus, as the source notes point out, it was highly likely known by the public that the Pharaoh's daughter was barren, so the mother was explicitly targeting a childless royal, someone who would actually have the power to defy Pharaoh's deadly decree and the maternal compassion to pity a weeping baby. It's a masterful, high-stakes psychological play.
And it works perfectly. The moment the Pharaoh's daughter opens the ark and sees the weeping child, she immediately recognizes him as a Hebrew. And right on cue, Moses' sister, who, remember, has been waiting for this exact moment, steps out of the background and asks a brilliant question. She says, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" Talk about a perfectly timed intervention. She just conveniently happens to be there to offer a solution to a problem the princess just discovered she had.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the unspoken agreement happening just beneath the surface of the text. The Pharaoh's daughter says, "Go." The sister fetches the baby's actual mother. The princess then tells the mother to take the child, nurse it, and get this, she even offers to pay her wages. The text strongly implies that the Pharaoh's daughter knew exactly what was going on. I mean, she knew her father was killing Hebrew infants, she knew this little girl conveniently showing up wasn't a coincidence, and she almost certainly knew this nurse was the baby's true mother. It's the silent co-conspiracy between a royal Egyptian and an enslaved Hebrew woman to bypass a deadly decree.
The plan works flawlessly. The child grows up safely under his own mother's care, and eventually, she formally brings him back to the Pharaoh's daughter to become her adopted son. And the princess gives him his iconic name, Moses, stating, "Because I drew him out of the water." So now, he is firmly established in the royal household, his whole life entirely shaped by the clever, subversive actions of these women.
Part 3. A vengeful act of murder.
But the story doesn't stay in the safety of the palace. We're entering a much darker and morally ambiguous part of the text that honestly often gets smoothed over. Bridging the chronological gap, we go from the baby in the reeds to the young man raised as a royal Egyptian son to a grown adult who finally steps out of the palace. He goes out to his Hebrew brethren specifically to look on their burdens. For the very first time, the text shows him confronting the brutal, everyday reality of his people's bondage.
And what he sees triggers a violent reaction. Moses spies an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew. But look closely at exactly how this is written in the text. Moses doesn't just rush in blindly. He looks this way and that way. He checks to make absolutely sure the coast is clear. Only when he sees that there is no man around does he slay the Egyptian. And then he literally hides the body in the sand.
This brings us to a critical distinction. Pop culture often frames this as a heat-of-the-moment intervention, right? Or Moses acting in defense of the slave during an ongoing assault. So the crucial point is,
The text reads as a calculated act of premeditated revenge, not spontaneous self-defense. Moses waited. He ensured there were no witnesses. He executed the Egyptian and covered up the crime. This is a profound moral complication for our protagonist.
And he doesn't even get away with it. The very next day, Moses tries to break up a fight between two Hebrew men. He tells the one in the wrong to stop, but the man snaps back at him. "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian?" His own people view his act as murder, not as some righteous defense. In that terrifying moment, Moses realizes his deadly secret is out.
Part 4. Exile in Midian.
Word of the murder reaches Pharaoh, who immediately seeks to kill Moses. This forces our protagonist to abandon his royal life entirely and flee for his life. He eventually ends up sitting by a well in the land of Midian. Now, Reuel, the priest of Midian, has 7 daughters who come to draw water for their flock. But aggressive shepherds arrive and try to drive the women away. And here, we see a different side of Moses. Without hesitation, he stands up, defends the daughters from the shepherds, and helps water their flock. It's an instinctual act of justice, but this time, it doesn't end in murder.
When the daughters return home quickly, their father asks why they finished so fast. Notice how they describe him. They tell their father that an Egyptian delivered them out of the hand of the shepherds. This is a deeply ironic and tragic detail. To the Midianites, Moses looks, acts, and dresses like an Egyptian. He has been entirely disconnected from his Hebrew roots. He's basically a man without a true country, rejected by the Hebrews, hunted by the Egyptians, and viewed as a total foreigner in Midian. Reuel invites Moses in, and Moses eventually marries one of the daughters, Zipporah. When they have a son, Moses names him Gershom, which translates to, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." That name perfectly encapsulates his profound feelings of alienation, exile, and loss of identity. He has lost his royal status, his people, and his home.
Part 5. The groans of bondage.
While Moses wrestles with his identity out in the desert, a much larger crisis is unfolding back in Egypt. We are shifting the focus away from individual human scheming to the desperate, powerless situation of the Israelites left behind. A significant amount of time passes. The king of Egypt, the Pharaoh who wanted to kill Moses, finally dies, but the oppression doesn't die with him. The children of Israel sigh and cry because of their bondage. Their suffering is escalating, and finally, their collective cry of agony comes up unto God. Up to this point, Exodus 2 has been a story driven entirely by human manipulation, secret conspiracies, violence, and escape. But here, at the very end of the chapter, the text makes a massive pivot. It says, "God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob." The narrative shifts away from the flawed actions of humans to the divine remembrance and compassion for the powerless. God looks upon the children of Israel and has compassion unto them.
And this brilliantly illustrates the power of reading the actual source material. When we look closely at Exodus 2, we don't find a simple fairy tale. We find tactical deception, premeditated murder, profound identity crises, and a deeply flawed protagonist. Which leaves us with a provocative question. When reading foundational texts, why do we so often sanitize the calculated risks, the moral ambiguities, and the deeply human flaws of the people involved? Perhaps it's because the messy, unsanitized reality is a lot more challenging, but as we've seen today, it's also a lot more fascinating. Thank you for joining me for this explainer.